Today I'm introducing a young man who's not just a little brother of mine in our collective efforts through criminal justice reform, but a little brother through the bond that we've built with each other. Jarrell Daniels is one of my closest friends, confidants, and mentors. When I need advice on a pressing situation, I can always come to Jarrell, who will always point me in the right direction. Jarrell has put me in position with numerous opportunities in the criminal justice spectrum, and he's come through time and time again in school, in the community, since becoming a member on the Annie Casey Juvenile Justice Strategy Group Foundation. Youth Advisory Council. He has made prolific contributions to group discussions, help make tough decisions in the group. He's recently given a TED Talk that hit almost 2 million views, and he's an undergraduate student at Columbia University. I wish Jarrell nothing but the best, and I hope that he continues to touch people and change people's lives and be a friend and mentor in the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Audrey. The funny part is I'm actually older than him. So I'm not the little brother. But thank you, though. No, it's definitely been an honor to get to know Audrey and watch his growth from some of the experiences that he had that are very much unfortunate, like a lot of us in the room who've had that contact with the criminal justice system. And I'm honored that he was able to, get up here and just share what he's been doing since his reemergence out of the justice system. Before I go any further, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's definitely an honor and a privilege to share a few words with you all today. Thank you, Nate, for extending this opportunity. Thank you, Lisa, for leading the foundation in these efforts moving forward. And thank you all for just sitting and listening to something I hopefully would inspire you to go out and continue this fight. Most people begin by, starting off with their name, their title within an agency, an institution. Y'all know what I'm talking about, right? So people talk about their title as if that's makes them who they are. But actually, when you wake up in the morning, what do you actually see? So I want to take a step back. I want to ask you, what do you see when you look at me? Of course, there's what I hope you would see. There's what society urges you to see. And then there's what your experiences with working with young people might tell you about the person I am. And then there's the person who I actually am. As I think about this, when I look in the mirror, I think about the past 7 years of my life. Having spent 6 of them incarcerated, beginning at the age of 18 to coming home last year, I've been presented with more opportunities than I ever thought I could imagine. I'm considered an educator, an activist, an advocate for criminal justice reform, and also an Annie E. Casey Juvenile Justice Strategy Group Youth Advisory Council member. That last one is definitely a mouthful, but it doesn't sum up all of my achievements. I've also been selected for a 2019 Youth Activist Fellowship with the Open Society Foundation and been able to continue my educational journey at the School of General Studies at Columbia University. All of these privileges have been afforded to me after I've had that unfortunate experience in the criminal justice system. And even as exciting as I think about my future and where my life might lead me to next, the pain of my past never truly fades. I still think about it as I close my eyes, and I reflect on my mother's addiction that led to my sisters and I being placed in foster care at the age of 5. And I think about how she struggled as an independent single woman, raising 4 children, trying to navigate life with the felony burden over her back, trying to move past the conviction that weighed heavily over her, trying to regain custody of her children. I see her fighting to rebuild her life until she was actually offered a laboratory technician position with Quest Diagnostics. And as our life was beginning to restabilize, my mother's newfound love had torn down the walls of her resistance that she had spent years building. So through these acts of domestic violence that me and my sisters witnessed for years at a time, my mother escaped with one last act of resistance and broke free, and we escaped to remove her to a shelter. And it was while residing in the shelter that not even my mother could predict it, the amount of trauma that me and my sisters would be exposed to at the age of 13. But through all of this, the only person who received the traumatic services that we call trauma care was my mother. None of the social workers, none of the caseworkers had ever thought to consider that me and my twin sister needed as much care as our mother did. But even as I talked to you about these experiences, I was still expected to graduate high school on time. And as I'm in high school, freshman year, 2 months into that, I was 14 years old and I was falsely arrested for a crime that I didn't commit. As a result of that, I was kicked out of my high school of choice and sent to one of the worst high schools in the Bronx, New York. The education system had made drastic changes to my educational journey without any consideration for my innocence. Again, I was faced with another traumatic experience and expected to move past this without any supportive services. By the time I had moved into the shelter for the first time in my life, the damage had already been done. I couldn't depend on the education system, the child welfare system, or the police department to protect and serve me or my family. Survival for me meant carrying a weapon. 3 years later, I used this weapon in a self-defense incident where I was trying to defend my sister. I was ultimately slashed in the face and discharged this weapon. I was sentenced to 6 years in state prison. As I returned to society, hoping to rebuild my life, I thought about this educational opportunity that I had while I was sitting in Queensboro Correctional Facility. 2 weeks before my release, the Columbia University Center for Justice partnered with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office to create a collaborative educational experience that brought prosecutors within this correctional facility to work with 8 of the incarcerated men over an 8-week period for them to co-author 6 policy proposals. These policy proposals were aimed at transforming the criminal justice system, in particular the practices within the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. This was an honorable experience for me, and I can honestly say that my view on prosecutors was actually changed from going through this course. And I can honestly say the same was true for them as well. But I asked myself, as I was given my second chance in society, why was this opportunity being afforded to people while they're sitting in prison? Why not before? I thought about the young people like myself who went into prison at the age of 18 and sometimes younger, who never held the position to have a conversation with an elected official or someone who held authority in their community. So I want to ask you all today, what can an authentic partnership with youth look like? For me, it begins with this tool that I've identified as collaborative education. Just before I was released, I spoke with Assistant District Attorney Jarrell E, who's in the audience today. And Jarrell, for me, is committed. He committed himself to transforming the lives of young people by providing them access and opportunities to work collaboratively with the District Attorney's Office of Manhattan to develop policy proposals in conjunction with them. I left this college class in prison committed to continuing my educational journey. This all led to me developing the Justice Ambassadors Youth Council at Columbia University. And I can honestly say that what we're doing is we're encouraging courageous youth ages 18 to 24 to work side by side with public officials from different city agencies over an 8-week period to discuss challenging community issues such as coping with trauma, racial inequality, and some of the other community challenges that aren't necessarily addressed. But even as I'm developing this program at Columbia University, I had to honestly think to myself, what am I actually thinking? Who would be in their right mind to bring young people together who've had some of the worst and unfortunate experiences with these systems to sit down and have an honest and meaningful conversation? I honestly thought this would go perfectly as planned. So on week 2, the second day of programming, you can imagine what happened. I had this bright idea going into the session. I thought I would bring up the murder of hip-hop activist and rap musician Nipsey Hussle. I thought I would open up the class by talking about the speculations around his murder, because the topic was conflict management and adverse experiences. I thought this was a great conversation. Minutes into the conversation, a debate ensued between one of the youth ambassadors and one of the senior officials that was inside of the room who was representing the police department. Law enforcement's perspective of the code, what they call cooperation for the court's consideration, was very different from the understanding that young people had for the term that they deemed snitching. So as you can imagine, the discourse led to a heated exchange of words between the two of them. But what was powerful in this moment was we learned that we had to build in a structure that would support these kind of challenging conversations. And we knew, if I go back to that question, if we wanted to form an authentic partnership with youth, this is the kind of conversations we needed to have. Because it forces people to step outside of their title, their position within an agency or an organization, and it forces you to think like a human being again. I was honored to see that at the end of this session, the young person and the representative from the police department sat down and committed themselves to using their example as a model of how authentic partnership can be formed. At the conclusion of the 8-week period, the both of them developed a policy proposal that was aimed at transforming the way crimes are reported within the police department, in which statements are factored in for the court's consideration. What's the most meaningful part of this experience for young people and for the city officials is for them to sit side by side and learn from one another and work together to come up with a set of community resolutions in the form of proposals. To highlight this certificate conferral and graduate ceremony, we ask that they present in groups, 2 young people, 2 officials. And in that group presentation, they present a proposal that they believe together will work to transform all of these systems that have failed my life and many others. I want to highlight a point. There was something that happened that most people won't really talk about. And as the brother James spoke about earlier, we talk about trauma as this loose topic. But if we really unpack what they consider adverse childhood experiences, we'll realize that everybody has had one of those experiences. Someone witnessed substance abuse in their house, someone was raised without a father, someone had an incarcerated parent, someone was a victim of child abuse, emotional neglect. See, when we get to the root causes of these adverse childhood experiences, we'll know that as a collective body of people who held positions within these agencies, that we have a call to action. That when we go home and we look in the eyes of our children, that they're looking up to us. And as the brother King Tone has said earlier, when we think outside of the box, when we force ourselves to reckon with who we are as an individual representing this agency, I think we can bring about justice. I think what was most important for me in working with Jarrell E is that he was someone who came to learn my story. But what he learned was that my story is not unique, but rather belongs to millions of black and brown men who've been traditionally deprived of their humanity from all of these systems that have historically failed them. But I believe it's through collaborative education that I was able to be heard in a way that positioned me to be a frontline advocate for directly impacted youth. Moving forward, I will continue to challenge injustices and systems that have traditionally displaced young people. Of course, I'm not perfect, and in no way should I be the prime example of someone to look up to. But I believe if young people were to look at me, they would see in me what can be overcome. And I'd like to use my story in a way to say that, imagine if Maya Angelou had died when she was 20 years old. She would have died a single mom and a prostitute. Imagine if the brother Malcolm had lost his life when he was 20 years old. He would have died a drug addict and a thief. And imagine me at 20 years old, sitting in solitary confinement and wondering, how would I be remembered if I lost my life tomorrow? I thought about all of the things that my mother had overcome in her life and all of the resiliency lessons that she instilled in me from watching her. And I thought that collaborative education would be something that would transform the world. You see, I believe that it's through education that we'll arrive at a truth that is inclusive and unites us all in the pursuit of justice. For me, it was a new kind of classroom and a brand new tool that showed me how both my mind and our justice system could be transformed. I want to thank you all for your time and for hearing me out. Thank you.